putain. Ça fait toujours du bien, un peu d'Offenbach et de Patricia Genikova. Je vais bientôt lire, hein, mais Offenbach chanté par Patricia Genikova, c'est beau quand même. Ouais. Incroyable. Ah, elle a fait Mine Erbarkis, of course. Margis sind sie. Bref. Donc, nous allons commencer Mimesis as Make Believe by Kendall Walton. Je passe l'introduction que j'ai déjà lue. Representation and make believe. The lunatic, the lover, and the poet are of imagination all compact. One sees more devils than vast hell can hold. That is the madman. The lover, all as frantic, sees Helen's beauty in a brow of Egypt. The poet's eye, in a fine frenzy rolling, does glance from heaven to earth, from earth to heaven. And as imagination bodies forth the forms of things unknown, the poet's pen turns them to shapes, and gives to every nothing a local habitation and a name. Such tricks hath strong imagination, that if it would but apprehend some joy, it comprehends some bringer of that joy. Or in the night, imagining some fear, how easy is a bush supposed a bear. A bush. Shakespeare, A Midsummer Night's Dream. Really nice title, by the way. In order to understand paintings, plays, films, and novels, we must look first at dolls, hobby horses, toy trucks, and teddy bears. The activities in which representational works of art are embedded and which give them their point are best seen as continuous with children's games of make-believe. indeed advocate regarding these activities as games of make-believe themselves, and I shall argue that representational works function as props in such games, as dolls and teddy bears serve as props in children's games. Children devote enormous quantities of time and effort to make-believe activities, and this preoccupation seems to be nearly universal, not peculiar not to any particular cultures or social groups. RP and RP children's games, some have suggested that all or nearly all children's play consists in pretense or make-believe, that tag is pretended chase and capture, for instance. The urge to engage in make-believe and the needs such activities address would seem to be very fundamental ones. If they are, one would not expect children simply to outgrow them when they grow up. It would be surprising if make-believe disappeared without a trace at the onset of adulthood. It doesn't. It continues, I claim, in our interaction with representational works of art, which of course itself begins in childhood. Pardon. The forms make-believe activities take do change significantly as we mature. They become more subtle, more sophisticated, less overt. The games children play with dolls and toy trucks are in some ways more transparent and easier to understand than their more sophisticated successors. This is one reason why children's games will help illuminate the games adults play with representational works of art. It goes without saying that in speaking of games of make-believe, we must disavow any implication that they are mere frivolity. Children's games serve purposes far more significant than that of keeping them happy and out of mischief. It is generally recognized, I believe, that such games and imaginative activities generally do indeed, as their prevalence suggests, have a profound role in our efforts to cope with our environment. Children in the Auschwitz concentration camp played a game called Going to the Gas Chamber. Some may be horrified at the thought of treating such a tragic matter so lightly, but this game is probably best regarded as an earnest attempt by the participants to comprehend and come to grips with their terrible situation. In playing it, they were, I suspect, facing the reality of genocide with the utmost seriousness. Much needs to be learned about the benefits of make-believe, about just what needs it serves and how it serves them. But suggestions come easily to mind. That engaging in make-believe provides practice and roles one might someday assume in real life, that it helps one to understand and sympathize with others, that it enables one to come to grips with one's own feelings, that it broadens one's perspectives. An advantage of regarding paintings, plays, and the like as props in games of make-believe is that whatever we may learn about the functions of children's games of make-believe, and whatever we may feel we know already, are likely to help explain how and why such representational works are valuable and important. Games of make-believe are one species of imaginative activity. Specifically, they are exercises of the imagination involving props. Before explaining what props are and how they operate, I must make several observations about imagining. Just one moment, please. Imagining. When we think about the imagination, examples like the following naturally come to mind. Fred finds himself in an idle moment, alone with his thoughts. Feeling unsuccessful and unappreciated, he embarks on a daydream in which he is rich and famous. He calls up images of applauding constituents, visiting dignitaries, a huge mansion, doting women, and fancy cars. But alas, reality eventually reasserts itself and Fred gets back to selling shoes. This is indeed a paradigm instance of an exercise of the imagination, but it is not in all respects typical. We must be wary of mistaking peculiarities of Fred's experience for features to be found in imaginings generally. An enormous variety of experiences come under the heading of exercises of the imagination. One peculiarity of Fred's imaginings is that they do not make use of props. Another is that they consist partly in having mental images. Imagining can occur without imagery, but I will focus now on three other characteristics of Fred's daydream that are not common to imaginings generally. It is deliberate. It consists of occurrent mental events or actions, and it is solitary, something he does by himself. Imaginings can be spontaneous, they need not be occurrent, and they are sometimes social rather than solitary activities or experiences. Before proceeding, we should note the independence of imagining from truth and belief. Much of what Fred imagines is false and is known by him to be false. But he imagines also that his name is Fred, that he prefers warm climates, that France is in Europe, and much else, and that he knows to be true. To say that someone imagines such and such is sometimes to imply or suggest that it is not true or that the imaginer disbelieves it. Nevertheless, imagining something is entirely compatible with knowing it to be true. I postpone consideration of the differences between imagining a proposition, imagining a thing, and imagining doing something, between, for instance, imagining that there is imagining a bear, and imagining seeing a bear, and the relations among them, but they will be important later. Spontaneous and deliberate imaginings. We sometimes decide on what to imagine, as Fred did. We form intentions to imagine this or that and carry them out. Imagining is sometimes deliberate, but not always. Often we just find ourselves imagining certain things. Our fantasizing minds stray, seemingly at random, without conscious direction. Thoughts pop into our head unbidden. Imagining seems, in some cases, more something that happens to us than something that we do. Like breathing, imagining can be either deliberate or spontaneous. Nice sentence. I'll write that down. The line between deliberate and spontaneous imaginings is not sharp. Varying degrees of kinds of control may be exerted over what and whether we imagine. And both deliberate and spontaneous imaginings are often combined in a single imaginative experience. A chain of imaginings begun deliberately almost always develops further on its own. One who decides to imagine a bear will find himself imagining a bear of a certain sort, a large, ferocious grizzly pacing back and forth, for instance. Elaborations of what we imagine deliberately occur spontaneously. Nevertheless, imaginative experiences involving relatively many relatively spontaneous imaginings differ significantly from more deliberate ones, insofar as our imaginings are deliberate. We are well aware of their dependence on us. It is obvious to the imaginer that the world of his imagination is an artificial contrivance, something dreamed up, something he constructed, bit by bit, by his choices of what to imagine. Spontaneous imaginings have a life of their own. The imaginer is more a spectator than the perpetrator of them. Rather than constructing her imaginary world, she watches as it unfolds. It seems less her own contrivance than something created and existing independently of her. She may be surprised at how it turns out. She may be amazed to find herself imagining a bear with candy cane stripes, and then watch with astonishment as, so to speak, this extraordinary beast jumps over the moon. Spontaneously created imaginary worlds are like the real world in their capacity to surprise us. Hmm. Imagining spontaneously can be more fun, more exciting than doing so deliberately. It is likely to be a more vivid or realistic experience, one which, in its independence of the real, is more like actually perceiving or otherwise interacting with the real world. Berkeley implies that ideas that arise spontaneously are not ideas of imagination at all, but real things. The ideas formed by the imagination have an entire dependence on the will. The ideas perceived by sense, that is, real things, being imprinted on the mind by a spirit distinct from us, have not the like dependence on our will. Three dialogues. See also Locke, Essays, chapter 11, section 5. Richard Wollheim suggests that it is the involuntariness of what one imagines, one's passivity in imagination, that conduces to the accompaniment of imagination by feeling. By terror, for example, when while watching King Lear, one imagines Gloucester being blinded, imagination and identification. Ok. J'en suis à la page 27 du document.